Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, and experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Chris Busselmaker, and today I'm delighted to have a conversation with Roger Burlton. Roger, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Fritz. Good to see you.
Yeah, and already for transparency, Roger and I, we go back at least 30 years. But for those of you who do not know you in highlights, you are the president of the Process Renewal Group since 1993, co-founder of BP Trends Associate, and to date you have conducted over 600 seminars and presented for 40,000 professionals around the world. You live in Vancouver, and so the main topic is the business process.
Great. I mean, the business processes, you can't avoid it. They're all around you and they're all involved with you.
Well, if you've been in that industry since 93, it's consistent. So your resume is actually very short.
Yes. Very wide.
Yeah, it's wide. But how do you, what's the trick to stay in that industry so consistently for such a long time?
Well, I think the critical issue here is that, like so many things that we find in business today and in people who are managing business today, they sort of come with all this hype and all of this excitement, but then people they lose patience, they lose attention, they go on to something else. They're always looking for something new. But one thing I've discovered in all the time I've been doing this is that even if business processes die down in terms of their visibility for a little while, they always come back. And the simple reason for that is organizations have people, they have tools, and work has to get done in order to get a result. And so you can't run away from it. Work will be done all the time. And so if you define processes as the way of determining what work should be done and how well that work should be done, they're always there. And so I find I have people I work with from 20, 30 years ago, as we've known each other that time, that there's always a return to the foundation.
The foundation. And so mentioned you're the president of the Process Renewal Group since 1993. Could you tell us a little bit about that organization and then also about BP Trends, what that is?
Sure. Process Renewal Group is a very small consultancy. It's myself and a few others, and other people who come in and out from time to time, where we just basically advise and help and coach and guide organizations through the common sense of what should be. How do you improve what you're doing? And so their processes, we renew them, and we are a group.
Okay, got that. And BP Trends?
BP Trends is an organization, a different association, which is mostly focused on providing knowledge and guidance and best practices from the industry at large. And so there's lots of good guidelines, lots of good recommendations, lots of good case studies of how people have been successful in doing this type of change in the organization, changing of processes, and the different ways of doing it and the different perspectives on how it should be done. So it's really just more of a knowledge source than anything else. And that the people who have contributed to it over the years are quite well respected. Organizations are quite well known. So it's a reference for people who want to check in and see what might be possible.
Okay. Now, before we go into how you do that and all these hundreds of speaking engagements, I know that you have an engineering background out of Canada. So how do you transfer from being an engineer to looking at a business process from an organization? And what was so appealing about it?
Well, first of all, in my engineering degree is in industrial engineering, which is probably the least hard-coded of all the engineering disciplines. And it really is, how do you engineer what people do, how it comes together, how things get made, how products get moved around, optimization of, and traditionally, it was in the physical manufacturing and distribution of goods, the kind of stuff you would expect to see from all those industrial revolution companies before we had more of a knowledge-centric society as we do today. But the principles which apply to all that apply to things which are not necessarily physical. That could be informational. And so it's just a natural extension to apply the same kind of thinking to how can I, as we do in the physical world, eliminate waste as we used to do in Lean and Six Sigma and things like that. But now applying that same thinking to getting rid of unnecessary work and getting better quality and faster time in industries where it's information and knowledge that's being shared or being delivered. The principles really aren't much different. They're adjusted a little bit for the situation, but not that much. They still apply. And so, and it's interesting. I mean, I graduated as an industrial engineer a number of years ago, of course, and it's actually quite funny right now because I'm now professor at the same university in the same program that I graduated from. And so, again, it's full circle. It's actually quite rewarding to see these very young up and coming professionals learning that a lot of the things that I learned, but in a modern context, in a context of digitalization, in a context of artificial intelligence. Work still has to get done and we still have to do it better. And so the education that I got at the time was still very, very appropriate.
Okay. Now, so what I'm hearing is the fundamental is the same. We still have to produce and work something. Can you share something about what have you seen changing over the years with respect to digitization and automation and referring to AI, as you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think the main thing that changes, of course, is the resources you use to enable you over and over again to actually conduct the work. The one big thing I think that's really changed is that before we would be making and distributing standard products off the shelf, which would have an awfully long time in market. You would produce something, maybe it'd take you 3 years to come up with it, get it into market, and you just roll with it for the next 20 years before you sort of thought much about changing it and so on. So but now I think what we're really seeing is that everybody is an individual. Every order is a unique order, or potentially. And the way that work gets determined or designed or configured is a way that allows infinite variation and personalization and customization. So everything off of an end-to-end process could be a unique configuration, but it follows a standard process. It's almost an oxymoron that we need standard ways of having variability. And that's really the challenge with design today, is we have to also understand that time in market has dramatically shrunk for products and services and ways of working. And so we don't have the luxury of taking 3 years to get something into market. We got to do it right away, which means that we have to sort of see how all the pieces fit and be able to pull a piece out and change it without ripping apart everything else that's in there, where it's all so intricately wired together that if you pull one bit out, you've destroyed everything else. So the way we do business design has dramatically changed. And we have to sort of think much more about architecture. How do all the pieces fit together? And don't build anything into something else without it being something that's really quite easy to change.
Got it. Now, I was wondering when you were sharing that with us, when you're describing what you can do, but how is an organization triggered to reach out to you? What's the key question what are typical questions they have when they come to you and say, look, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I need your help.
Well, I think there's really two things. One of them is they have a burning need to change something in market for one of two reasons. It might be that they're suffering competitively or with regard to what people expect from them. If it's things like not a competitive environment, you still need to do better. And they need some help just navigating the journey of making the change happen. So what we typically will bring is a set of common sense approaches and stages to go through in order to figure that out. That's one thing. So in other words, there's a burning platform somewhere. And what we're seeing now is more and more of the people who didn't do their homework years ago now are finding they're going to have to make major changes happen across the organization pretty darn fast, or they're potentially at risk in terms of existence. The other thing we're seeing is that organizations are realizing, not just from the point of view of a specific problem or a specific product or a specific market, they're realizing they need the fundamental ability to change easily. And so they see it as a higher level issue that applies to everything that comes along and everything that will come along. Maybe they don't have a problem today, but if they're not ready for the next big shock, they won't be able to handle it. And they'll be in the middle of all kinds of trouble while they're trying to make it happen. In other words, they start to see much more of a vision of how organizations need to run in order to be infinitely, strong word, but infinitely adaptable to the change.
Yeah.
And if they're more mature even than that, they see a competitive advantage in their ability to change things quickly and get ahead and stay ahead. And so as the shocks come, they're already beyond all of that. Maybe they're the ones creating the shocks in the first place. So there's a range of people who are looking for those kind of services. So, and it's one of the reasons why more and more today, so much of our work is coaching, just helping people sort of through the journey and setting up the organization to be able to adapt and adjust to things they don't even know about yet. I mean,
okay. And what is it that you bring to the table where they would trust you to show them how it's going to change and what they're missing?
Well, I mean, usually people come to us because they've either read something or heard something that's gone on, and they feel, certainly they're feeling some pain, or they're anticipating they will be feeling some pain if they don't do something about it. And for some reason, I think really what we bring more than anything else is we bring a lot of common sense perspective on what makes sense. And it's, as much as anything else, it's the idea that organizations have to manage cross-functionally. They have to, I mean, it's a really valid point that your customers don't care about how you do things.
Yeah.
They care about how they interact with you. But your traditional functional departments that don't talk to each other or have roadblocks or delays or problems, or you create errors, they don't look at the process from the customer back to the customer. They look at it from departments and so on. And so, but this is why this process perspective is still so important. People don't care about the inside of your organization. They care about what happens with them. And so I've written a book recently, which I call Business Architecture, which is how do you architect all these things around those processes? But the subtitle says collecting, connecting, and correcting the dots. And it's so much about what's going on now is that organizations are very complex. All of our resources are very complexly connected up to the work that we're doing. But people don't know what the connections are. And they don't know if I change A over here, the B over here is going to be impacted. And so that the ability to sort of understand how the pieces fit. So if I change one, I'm not messing up everything else. That keeping things connected, I think, really is the trick.
Okay.
And
I got that. Now, when you do your work, suppose for instance, the question starts in the marketing department as an starting point. Would you then also advise to bring in the marketing experts who understand marketing before you talk just about the process? So do you get subject matter experts to understand what's happening?
Well, the interesting thing is, a lot of the time, people within the organization understand the issues for sure, but they also understand the possibilities of what might be happening outside. So that's usually why we'll get a call to say, can you help us through this? But we would never rely solely on the people inside an organization, because you can keep improving, but you miss the big wave that's coming, which is going to take you out. Like 3 years ago, nobody thought that generative AI would be so predominant so fast. But here we are, and like every one of these waves, everybody thinks it's the last wave. No, it's not the last wave. I'm sorry. There's another one coming. We just don't know what it is yet. Maybe it's a tsunami.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And actually, question if AGI is actually already 3 years ago or just 2 years ago. Not certain. It came very quick, very fast. At least that's sure. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And
the
interesting thing about that particular topic is that if you act, one of the things that people are learning now is that even with generative AI types of capabilities, and even agentic AI's capabilities, those all fit in a process. In other words, the AI is not going to take over your whole end-to-end process. It's going to fit in certain places. But the best solutions that we're seeing have a human in the loop somewhere, because you have to have trust. You got to make sure it makes sense. AI is not going to tell you how to determine what your strategy or your priorities are going to be. You still have to do that. And so there's still this issue of process, but with AI is not taking away the need to connect those dots.
Okay. I'll move on to the fact that you have spoken to over 40,000 professionals around the world.
Actually, it's more than that now. I'm sure that data is a little bit old, but okay. Yes, many.
Well, it's still a lot.
Yes.
Is it always the same presentation? Is there the same like constant message, or how much do you cater it to the audience?
Well, there are some principles, and the principles such as when you design how work's going to be done, you do it starting with the external stakeholder, and you work your way back into the organization. You don't care about your org chart, because that's just a variable. So the principles really haven't changed much, and it's really interesting when people don't do well with this, where they mess it all up, they almost always violate some principles somewhere. It's not some special technique or little trick or some diagram that you can describe things. But there are new ways, as I said just a moment ago, that with artificial intelligence, it has come along and done a big thing, but you need to make sure you know in your process where artificial intelligence is going to play. It also has affected how you do your changes in the organization. I can of all the work we've always done, I can accelerate it to maybe 50% of the time compared to what I used to have when I used to go out there and interview 50 people to find out what the issues were. I can find out so much more quickly using that as a tool. I also make sure that whatever we're saying is adapted to the challenges of the industry and the challenges of the organization. Even though there's foundations, it's always different. In all these years, I've never done the same project twice.
Okay,
it's always special. Yeah. It always depends. Yeah. So that old expression of "it depends" is still true.
Yeah. Now, if you're on stage so long to share your knowledge, did it came natural for you, or did you have to learn presenting on stage? Specifically, giving
a mentor of mine. I'm thinking a mentor of mine a number of years ago, fairly early in my career, said, Roger, he said, one of the things I've learned is that half of my career was learning how to do the right type of work and so on, learning the techniques and things, and getting some experience. And he said the other half was learning how to talk about it. And I think that probably is a good representation of how my career has gone, because I think that there's always resistance to new ideas, resistance to changes in how people think, and language is a really important issue because people will be quite prepared to dismiss what you're saying Um, you have to be able to articulate things in terms of what you've seen, and you also have to make a simple view or simple description of what's going on, and yet have it ring with the truth, ring with we can't avoid this. So I these days I do talk about it a lot, but I talk about it a lot to people within organizations as well as in the general conference space and so on. But I'm still doing the work with people, and I'm still talking to them about how we do that work. But it's always a matter of tuning it and adjusting it. Every organization has a different heritage, different background. I mean, a family-run company, the language is different than if you're a publicly traded company versus if you're a government agency. The principles might be the same, but making it fit into that environment is going to be absolutely essential. I think that's where the experience and the knowledge comes in.
No, got that. Now, what other influences do you have to take into account when looking at the business process other than, let's say, the rational side? Because when you talk about Lean Six Sigma, trying to optimize the best process, that's a very rational quest. But I can also imagine there are other elements in an organization. I was just thinking because you mentioned family offices, where you might decide to advise not optimizing a process from a rational perspective, but leaving it as is because of other reasons. Do you recognize this?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I always talk about is that when you're talking about business process, you're not just talking about activities and workflow. You're talking about data. I mean, and especially these days with AI and digitalization and analytics and things like that, that process is producing and consuming data, and also produces an asset you can use for many other things, for decision making and so on. But there's also humans involved, and there's an organizational structure, and there are motivations and incentives that managers have. All this needs to be sort of on the table. There's business rules. You have to, there's so many things that go into the mix which make a process work or not work.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it might be smarter to leave certain of those aspects out of consideration because you just know it's never going to stick. And so this is where the cultural aspect, I think, is sort of the biggest challenge in so much of this, because I can be very rational. I can describe what rules have to change. I can describe what skills have to be updated, what kind of people need to be trained, what they need to be trained on, and what the requirements are for my IT capabilities I'm going to use, and whether or not I should open a new office in the Netherlands if I'm a Canadian company. Like all that kind of stuff is very rational. But the behaviors of people and the culture is something that's going to be the biggest roadblock if we don't get that right. So what more and more we're putting on the table, what culture do you have, and what culture would you like to have? And is that a reasonable option, or should we go with something else because the culture will support it and we can be on it right away, rather than going through a 3-year cultural transformation program and really suffering as we're going through it? I think that's one of the things we've really recognized. Like, even as we go through more and more and more automation, more and more and more, we see human culture and behavior as being an obstacle.
Yeah. Okay, and a link to that. Can you recognize or identify or define what a good business process professional is, or the students you have in your class? Can you recognize, he's going to get it, or she's going to get it, or he not? Him not? Is that something you can do?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite interesting with our university students. We have 120 students each year, and they are the 4th-year industrial engineering students, and it's mandatory. They have to take this class. If they don't get through this class, they don't graduate. So it's important to them. That doesn't excite everybody.
Yeah, I can
in
understand.
a good way. It does some people. This is not what they see as their career path, and so you can sort of recognize this by seeing whether people are broader thinkers or very focused thinkers. we have some students who are very good at a specific type of skill, and they're going to be valuable in an organization. But I don't want to make them the leader of a process management transformation. I need somebody who can sort of step back, see how all the pieces fit together, and understand that there's a ramification of changing. If I change that system, I'm going to have to change a whole bunch of other things as well that go along with it. And they just immediately, it's almost like they've got a model in their head where all these pieces are connecting to one another. And if they pull on this string, this other thing moves over here. Their ability to see that. And I find that you can see it pretty quickly. You can see pretty quickly. So I wouldn't have those detailed oriented people managing the program of transformation. Maybe they have a role in the project somewhere to be really go deep on something where we need to go deep. So I think that combination of competencies is really, really quite good. And, you know, I mean, I never forget, I'll give you a little story. I never forget the story of when I even remember the room I was in at the university where I'm teaching now. I was in a room and we had a professor teaching something called management science. And he said, you have to deal with motivation and how things work together and what the ramifications are. He said, can you imagine, for example, when cities on a big river system, they basically deal with their water and their sewage. Every city gets the water intake upstream, and they have the effluent going into the river downstream. So can you imagine if the rules were you must take in your water downstream from your effluent? What behavior would that bring into that particular city? And I never forget that story, because it really hit home with me. But all these things are connected up together, and a decision you make in one place is going to affect you someplace else. And I think it's that thinking that makes people good change agents, makes them good process thinkers, and allows them to sort of look through the whole thing end to end to say, if I'm doing something here, what does that mean later? So that was really key to me. I forget the professor's name. I'm sure he's dead now.
So. Oh no, who knows? But in all those third years, what were for you I would say, were there any brilliant failures? Were there any situations where, oh, that's a milestone, that's where I really learned a lesson for my vocation?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that I definitely have had those situations where I realized partway through, this is just not going to work. And usually the few times that I've seen that happen, which I won't say I'm proud of those situations, because we failed. But in those situations, it was almost always when the executives within the organization, the senior executives, had a personal motivation which was not consistent with the outcomes of the process that we were looking at. In other words, what was good for the customers in the marketplace was not necessarily good for that individual, because we had this silo hierarchical organizational structure, and each one of those executives had different measures, different targets, different incentives. And I could optimize the end to end, but it might be worse for that department in terms of that human's individual motivation. So a lack of goal alignment with executives, for me, is the number one thing. And that's why I like, there's a movement on right now called self-management, which is eliminate those hierarchies, basically reward people on the same things you want in your process is what you provide incentives for people on. So you get your customer's perspective and your manager's perspective on the same thing. And I think this is going to be really, really important, because with artificial intelligence, we're knocking out those layers in between. And it's a much shorter stack than it used to be. At least there's the opportunity for that. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that stuff happening. It is happening already. Organizations are going to complete self-managed. I have one organization I work with, and they say, Roger, we don't have managers. but we do have management. And it's peer-to-peer, where the result of one particular process or a portion of that process is feeding another one. But both those people looking after those areas are on the same incentive plan. They got the same outcomes. They share the result of the organization as a whole, rather than having something that says, if I optimize my piece, if I reduce my cost by taking out unnecessary activity, maybe that wasn't so unnecessary. It was really important downstream, but nobody knew that. And the customers are suffering because the end-to-end doesn't work.
The organizational model is changing because of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Now, a couple of things before, unfortunately, we have to close this great conversation. I'm really fascinated. Is there any advice you can give young people starting out a career with respect to what you've learned over the years?
Yeah, I think that for the young people, I would embrace, rather than only diving deep into something, which is probably going to be different in a year, 2 years, 3 years, I would just sort of step back and take a broader view, try to see how the pieces fit. And so that you understand where what you're doing is having an impact on everybody else. I think that if you understand that and you can contribute towards an organization's broader view, you'll do well in your career, because you will be seen as a contributor, not just somebody with a particular skill. It might be hard to teach that thinking, but it might be more a matter of personal characteristics. But try to figure out, whatever you're working on, what it means in the end game, and how are you contributing, and make sure you are contributing, and then you'll get lots of opportunity.
Okay, now it's a great segue to my last question, Roger. What have you contributed? What's your legacy? What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the fact that I've helped organizations learn to do things better. And it's not just about the project of fixing this process or getting this outcome. It's learning how to think about things differently. And I'm most proud of the fact that I believe I've helped a lot of people think differently about how organizations can run and should run, and what the possibilities are, helping them be better at what they do. That's really what I'm most proud of. That's why I enjoy the teaching at the university, catching those kids fairly young, and so that they can then contribute and keep doing what I've been doing. This is why I keep doing it, because I still love it.
Well, Roger, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and insights on the business process. Hopefully more people will pick it up based on this podcast. So thank you so much for sharing your insights so far. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Chris. Good to see you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.